Hello and welcome to the Division III Student Athlete Advisory Committee Mental and Physical Health Subcommittee podcast series. My name is Jack Bell and I'm a former soccer, swimming, and diving student athlete at Luther College. I represent the American Rivers Conference on National SAAC, and today I'm here with Professor of Applied Leadership Studies at Luther College, Dr. Jeff Boke. Jeff, how are you doing today? Could you introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us a little bit more about your story and what led you to the field of Applied Leadership Studies?
Well, nice to be here today, Jack. I can tell you it wasn't in the plan at the very beginning, for sure. When I first got out of undergraduate school, I was a high school teacher and a coach, and because I needed to make a little extra money, I got a job as a recreation therapist at an adolescent treatment center. And over a short period of time, I found that I was really liking the work that I was doing at that residential treatment center a little bit better. It was satisfying me in many ways that I was kind of surprised by. And while I was there, I was doing art therapy, and I was also doing adventure education, which was fun for me because what we did is we had residents who were there trying to learn how to lead healthier lives, make better decisions, and we were able to do it by getting people involved in adventure, which is something that I had never considered doing for a purpose like that. For me, it was always just kind of diversional and fun. So I did that, really enjoyed it, ended up in a hospital in Wisconsin, and was able to start a new program, which was called an experiential therapy program, at a hospital there that got a lot of success. We were lucky. The right people saw us and did a lot of regional and national news about us, and the result of that was I had a lot of people get a hold of me and say, hey, can you help us do the same kind of thing? And eventually I thought, gosh, this sounds like kind of a neat thing. I'm young, let's go for it. So I left my practice at the hospital, and I started a company called DIII. That company at first was providing programs pretty specifically towards healthcare facilities, residential treatment centers, psychiatric facilities, group homes, places like that. Over time, our client base got bigger, but we were still providing adventure recreation programs for purposes of learning some things depending on what the group was. The company did well. I was lucky. I surrounded myself with good people. We ended up being a company that delivered programs globally to dozens and dozens of countries around the world. And I had a good run for over 25 years as the owner and manager of that company. During that time, I went to school because I was trying to figure out why this stuff worked so well. I couldn't define it academically. So I went to school and pursued a graduate degree in experiential education, which in many ways changed my world professionally. Another graduate degree in leadership with an emphasis in outdoor recreation and health science, and then a doctorate in educational leadership and management. So that's kind of how I got into where I am right now, but it's a long story.
Yeah, for sure. That's amazing. So in your opinion, how have these past professional experiences shaped your passion for leadership? And what about it really screamed leadership to you and getting down into that path of applied leadership studies?
Leadership's kind of an interesting term, and you've heard me talk about it a lot because you've had me in class. Mm-hmm. It's an ambiguous term and very difficult to define. In fact, if you look it up in the dictionary, I always tell people this. It says, the act of leading, which just kind of cracks me up. That'd be like me saying, hey, can you tell me how to make a chocolate cake? And you'd say, oh, make a cake that tastes like a chocolate cake. I want more when I'm going to define what something is. So I found that out very early on when I started taking a look at leadership and trying to figure out what it is I needed to do. So I think the first thing I did was ask a lot of questions. And I think that shaped me a lot, because to try to figure things out, you just got to keep inquiring the best ways that you can. And the best way for me to do it was for me to try to create common themes between the different things that I had done and was doing. What's a common theme between a teacher, a therapist, a business owner, and maybe a team developer? something is happening that's the same. We're impacting lives, people are working together, leadership is occurring, I just don't know how to define it and I'm not sure why yet. What I do know is that providing a teaching environment shapes people, and it enhances personal growth, and it needs structured expectation. Those things I know. It's a blend of emotional desire and thoughtful action. All the things that make people successful, whether it's in athletics or if it's in business or school, it has to do with motivation and potential and ambition and desire and those types of things. For me, experiential education, probably that first graduate degree I went after, helped me because it taught me that action is a necessary condition for learning, especially with certain types of things. And I built on it with what I did, and I built on it as I just kept trying to define what leadership was.
Awesome. Yeah. And going off that idea, right, what do you think is the best way to sum up effective leadership and in teams, within individuals, but most importantly, how do you lead yourself, right? What is the concept of self-leadership and how does that affect a healthy lifestyle?
I think good leadership, one of the roots of good leadership is the understanding that variety is present and variety is necessary, and the way that you teach or the way that you lead or the way that you influence needs to involve it, as well as the fact that the variety of people that you're delivering to exists all the time. You can't define people by one quantitative definition, that's for sure. Rules, norms, expectations, all of those types of things are different from person to person to person. So you need to be understanding that you speak in a way that variety can understand, that variety applies. Working with the whole person is another thing. We got to make sure that what we do, if we're going to influence people as a boss or as a teacher, whatever it may be, we're trying to affect the whole person. And that means the half of the person that has gut instincts and has feelings and desires and all those things that are very, very hard to describe. But that those things are given equal credence as systemic learning, charts, graphs, data, that type of thing. We need both. And so I think keeping those both in mind as we are trying to influence a group of people or a person from A to B, whatever that may be is important.
Nice. Yeah, for sure. And to dive a little bit more into this kind of self-leadership aspect, me and you have talked about the secret curriculum within leadership and relating that kind of daily habits of successful people. How do you see that play out in your past professional leadership and roles? How do you see the secret curriculum really play out for individuals to find success?
Again, I think it has to do with inclusivity. I really think it does. It has to be rooted in diversity, and you have to be willing to take a good, honest look at who the people are, why they are who they are, where they came from, and how I'm going to best communicate with them in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And connecting it to athletics for this subcommittee, our mental and physical health subcommittee, looking at a role of a coach or a captain in shaping a team culture, there's a lot of leaders out there, captains that wonder, how do you lead instead of manage a group? And I think we've touched on that, me and you, throughout the years. But can you just give a little bit touch on that of leading rather than managing always? Yeah,
that's a good question. I think having a grasp on who it is, again, that you're delivering to is important. Well-being is rooted in inclusion. Well-being is rooted in building a playground that people of all types of variety and abilities can get on and play on. Defining culture, I think, is important in making sure that young leaders understand that culture is not only something they need to know about, but it controls everything about the people that they're leading. People believe what they believe, they have the biases that they have, they do what they do, they speak the way they speak, they live the way they live because of cultural uniqueness. Their cultures molded them. We need to understand that. It's part of the definition of diversity, but we also need to understand that what we need to do is we need to create as a leader a culture of discipline that pulls them into an influential something that can have the same effect. My grandpa always used to say, you know, if they'd ask him a question that was difficult, especially if it was about some controversial thing about politics, you know, or religion or whatever, he'd say, I just believe what I believe, because that's what I was taught. That's a good thing to remember. That's why people believe. Change happens, be ready for it. Be ready to change the way you do things. Be ready to know that you're not there to give all the information. You're there to give context to provide, to guide, to help people use information and talents that they already have in the best way they can.
Yeah, for sure. Just looking at some of the student athletes that are going to listen to this, you know, could you give, you can go wherever direction you want on this, but could you give one piece of leadership or life piece of advice for these student athletes that kind of struggle with the balance of athletics, class, and all that college and life kind of brings, right? You said that change is going to happen, and college is a great place where change happens. Could you just give a little bit piece of advice of how leadership kind of plays into just change in your own life?
Change is it's inevitable and it needs to be embraced. Change is at the heart, I think, at the heart of who we are, what we do, and how we're going to do it. The world is changing, therefore we must change in the way that we affect it. Leadership is about change, but leadership is also about molding a common vision so that the change is intentional and the change is motivated by thought and feelings of the group to get to a certain place. There's lots and lots of books out there right now on leadership change theory, and they come at it from every angle that there is. But the one thing that is universally true is that you need to celebrate it, be ready for it, and lead in a way that honors it and uses it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just to end here, for our student athletes listening to take something away from it, right? Go to a different direction. Those who want to dive into leadership further, is there any resources that you suggest? And this is not an advertisement, but any books or podcasts that you really think are great videos, TED Talks that could really help for people that are interested in leadership studies and improve their own well-being through leadership?
There are so many that to make a list is about impossible. Mm-hmm. I can tell you this: if you're interested in leadership, I would say look for it. You can Google it. You're going to find every single angle that you can possibly think. There's tons of good TED Talks out there. There's tons of good, talks out there. There's people like Simon Sinek, who does a beautiful job with TED Talks and with videos. There's people out there like Daniel Pink that does a great job. All those people also write books. We've got books on every type of leadership perspective that there is. And the nice thing is that we also have data right now that we didn't have in the past, because leadership is becoming a much more visible and honored discipline of study. And so there's some neat information out there that you can find if you're trying to figure out why or what works, or how can I justify why this works? Because there's stuff that says when a survey was taken, we have statistically significant, data that shows that A, B, and C work, and this is why. There's ways to do that. So what I would say is that go ahead and read and watch podcasts and watch videos, but also study. Study learning theory. Leadership is about learning theory. It's about how can something be presented in a way that a person wants to learn from it, so that they think a little bit differently tomorrow than they did today, which means they learned something.
Love it, love it. Well, Jeff, thank you for the time today. I know we could talk for hours, but I know I am honored that you were here for this interview, and it made my day to be able to sit down and share your information and your knowledge to everybody else who gets to watch this. So thank you very much, and have a great day.
Yeah, thank you.